Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar, where we will be discussing how to respond to the new normal and how to prevent added risk during the pandemic and post-pandemic. The presenters today will be myself, Vlad Gatsev. I'm a partner and a director of security at Netrix, and I also hold the CISO role. As well as my counterpart, Rich Lilly, who is also a partner and associate director, and he is responsible for anything and everything security. He's a chief security evangelist at Netrix for any Microsoft security technologies. Today we will cover real quick who is Netrix. For those of you who are not familiar with us, we are going to go over real quick some statistics that we see being released out there by research agencies and different organizations, and then we're going to cover a couple of interesting topics of interest, which our customers have been asking us while kind of scrambling to respond to this new normal and enabling their work from home for their remote workforce. So we'll talk real quick about one of the buzzwords out there, which is zero trust approach to security, and then which is actually very relevant in the remote work from home type of environment. As well as what does that do? What does the new normal do to the network edge? And then we will close real quick with some ideas and thoughts of how we can help. If there are any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A session, and we will respond as we go. Real quick about who is Netrix. Netrix is a global technology consulting and managed services firm with presence in 60 metro areas throughout the United States, as well as offices in Europe and Asia. Netrix currently employs 500 plus employees, and 400 of those are technical people with holding field engineering or support engineering role. The other thing that I wanted to highlight is that we have a 24/7 by 365 cloud management center from where we provide managed support services and operations services for infrastructure and security for our customers, and the management center is fully staffed by Netrix employees and providing full to-sun support for our customers. Netrix is focused on providing full lifecycle services for our customers, and we have a dedicated group focusing, in addition to our enterprise focus, we have a dedicated group focusing on mid-market customers, financial services customers, healthcare vertical, commercial real estate, legal verticals, and those kind of the list that I provided is require specialized type of engineering services and support, which is why we've built those verticals so we can provide the necessary focus and better service those verticals. And from a technology perspective, our focuses are cloud infrastructure and security, modern application and data intelligence, as well as collaboration. During this webinar, we will focus on security conversation more than anything, but you can obviously, if you're interested to learn more about our other capabilities, definitely reach out. So what are we seeing from a remote worker perspective pre and post-COVID? It's a very post-COVID-19. This is very interesting conversation, and there is very interesting data which is available on the internet. Like some of the interesting key points I wanted to highlight here for everyone is that pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, only about 3.6% of the employees work from home half of the time or more. And the interesting shift that we're seeing, and obviously the big shift that we saw, is that for some of our customers, more than 90% of their workforce had to shift work from home overnight. But the estimates are that post-pandemic, at a minimum of 25 to 30% of the workforce will shift to work from home permanently, which is obviously a significant uptick from the 3.5%. The interesting part is that I was looking at some statistics not too long ago, that some old statistics from 6 months ago that was saying that the forecasts were that by the end of 2022, about 15% of the people will start, 15% of the employees will start working remotely. Some percentage of, meaning some parts of the week, but obviously the virus and kind of the pandemic kind of really quickly expedited this, and we found ourselves at the statistics, the numbers that they were estimating for end of 2022 are already here, right? So kind of things changed a lot quicker, and enterprises were forced to rethink their strategies a lot quicker, and they didn't really have those 2 years that were originally predicted, right? One other interesting interesting piece of statistics that we found out there from by Gallup is that about 56% of the workforce has a job which is compatible with remote work. And what we actually, from interacting with our customers during the last, 45, 60 days, we actually see an interesting trend where our customers are quickly realizing that that work from home is actually a very viable option. And customers who were thinking that they're not, for them, their business doesn't allow their workers to work remotely, actually quickly realized they were actually forced to do it. They were forced to realize that the work, the type of work that their workers are doing is actually compatible with work from home. So the kind of the forecasts are that this is basically kind of turning into the new normal. Remote worker, the rise of the remote worker and work from home is going to be the new normal. This is kind of further, few additional statistics to further highlight this, is that the Global Workplace Analytics Organization has released some numbers showing that there is actually financial motivation for the enterprises to migrate to remote worker type of scenario. The forecasts and kind of the estimates, the calculations are that employers can save up to $11,000 per year per employee for every employee who starts working remotely. And at the same time, obviously, there are benefits for the employee themselves, and because they won't have to travel to work, they will be saving from, the employees will be saving from travel time, from travel expenses, and so on. Employers are going to be saving from not having to get as much real estate, not having to maintain as much office space, and so on, right? So kind of all these statistics are leading us to believe that the new normal is the remote worker is actually the new normal. That's not temporary, and a lot of the companies, actually a lot of the clients we work with are already starting to think about how to retool and how to kind of change their business model to go to a more permanent work from home solution. Throughout these conversations, we have had a lot of discussions around how to enable the remote workforce, how to enable it, and how to enable the work from home in a secure fashion. And some of the interesting I'd say, buzzwords that we hear about and that kind of come up almost in every conversation are zero trust and the new network edge, the new perimeter. With this, I want to pass the token to Rich, who is going to talk to us about what zero trust means for the remote workforce.
Yeah, appreciate it, Vlad. Thank you very much. So, yeah, this is, as Vlad said, there's some common buzzwords out there today, and I think zero trust can mean a lot of things, and there's somewhat of a not strong understanding by many what it really means. So today, in my part of the session here, we're going to try to explain a little bit more about some of the framework of zero trust, why it's important, especially in the days of, as Vlad said, COVID-19. We don't necessarily have trustful boundaries anymore. So what does that mean? How can we shift towards it? Historically, where have we come from? So with that, let's start with kind of just some basic history around kind of how we've all worked historically. If we look back in, say, the 1990s, most employees really worked exclusively and only in their corporate office. It was a joy, right? Not to have email on your phone all the time or be connected everywhere, anytime. Those are, the good old days. In this case, it was very easy to control access to services because you either had a PC in your office, at your office rather, and that access was dictated by the fact that you were sitting on the LAN. If I went home, I didn't consume corporate email from a mobile device for the most part. I didn't consume that from a home PC. I was easily able to separate kind of that work and personal content. Therefore, from a security perspective, I can also control that access pretty easy through my perimeter. Typically I'll refer to that as, what used to be my castle and moat. I pull up the drawbridge and nothing can get in because I know I can protect that castle. What's happened over the years is a lot of the core breaches have typically been focused in on the edge, right? So you look at, back at some of the breaches that have happened in years past. A majority of them have been primarily due through, external edge-facing services that have been breached. I open up that one hole in the wall and all of a sudden the entire army can come in. That really was the reality and was the focal point. So for the last, 15, 20, 30 years, we've really been focused heavily on the perimeter. How do we secure it? How do we ensure that if we can't ensure it's secure, how do we drop it into a microsegmented network? Or how do we find other avenues to protect content that may not open us up to potential risk? There are more modern ways of approaching that. But in the past, this is primarily what most organizations were worried about. There's some interesting telemetry that we see out there in the market. One of the biggest issues today is phishing. I think we all know that. We've all experienced it. I get at least one phishing email every single day in either one of my work or personal accounts. When we look at that across a bigger base for folks that are not like myself in cybersecurity or IT, about 15% of employees will click through any of those phishing links, which represents a risk. You think about the scale of that. About 60% of those 15% will give up their credentials in there because it looks like a fake payroll page, or it looks like a fake login for Office 365 or Google Mail. So the reality is, it's very difficult to control because these threats are not just in our perimeter. If I'm receiving this on my mobile phone, on my home PC, on my laptop, like everyone is today working from home, that's going to come from anywhere, and I don't necessarily always have control over that. Excuse me. The other thing is that there are immense amounts of brute force attacks that have really taken foothold over the years here. If we look at some of the numbers out there, there are about 10 million brute force attacks in 2017. That increased tenfold by 2018 and threefold from there in the numbers that came from the 2019 year. These types of brute force attacks are primarily password spray or breach replays. So again, someone just trying to shoehorn a password into a lot of known accounts. Out there today are numerous tools that you can go out and find that will scrape a LinkedIn company page, formulate their email address from their domain suffix, create those accounts, and then just start to hammer them with as many passwords as possible. Unfortunately, with today's technology being as great as it is, being able to do graphics card acceleration, I can easily run through 10 million passwords in 15 or 20 times quicker than I could have done even a year or two ago. So these things are real and they are happening, because the whole goal is I get into that first patient zero and then pivot to one of our more important accounts to try to get further access and persistence. The other kind of appalling stat to me, which I really hate this, that this is the fact that less than 1% of end users are protected by MFA. MFA is one of those things that is these days critical for access. And MFA just doesn't have to mean these days of bothering you on a phone call or a text message or a push notification. It could be a FIDO2 token that you plug into your PC. It could be your device provides the challenge and the authorization based on NAC-like capabilities. But just the simple fact that this is not taken foot quicker, hopefully it is now, this is a real challenge and a real concern. The other one I think is the most appalling is that approximately 2% of admins for, in this case, Office 365 had adopted MFA. So you think about the simple scenario of breaching an account and a password spray, and hopefully using strong passwords and using things like JIT and GIA, or just in time and just enough access. The goal is to minimize that exposure, but 98% of the accounts out there could potentially be exposed with guessing a simple password or phishing that in some way. These are the things that we really have to work to combat as we progress here. In this kind of traditional model that I mentioned earlier, again, I kind of refer this to as the castle and moat, right? In most cases, my users and devices and apps were protected behind my perimeter or behind the device firewall. In this case, by the mid 90s, if I was coming in from home, in this case, I was connecting primarily through VPN or internet, and primarily firewalls and VPN were the way of controlling that access. Even today, a lot of customers still force tunnel traffic for a variety of reasons, both some good and some bad. But the reality is that I still had control because I could force someone to come in through a specific pipe or channel. What happened in the early 2000s is there started to be an evolution of technology and consuming SaaS resources. So we look back in the year 2000 when Salesforce launched. Big vendors such as Concur moved completely to the cloud in 2005. A groundbreaking iPhone was released in 2006, and now we even have devices that are not just phone capable, but things like Fitbit, which I could even get an email notification on. So this kind of proliferation of IoT devices is even furthering now as we start to keep on going. So in all these realms and consuming our corporate data on different devices and streams, that functionally shifts how we think about and need to manage our end users and endpoints today. And we look at other revolutions such as when Microsoft made a big change in moving Office 365 or BPOS, if you remember that, back in 2011. So what that shifted is moving us to a model like this, which is, some see this as chaos, and it is somewhat organized chaos. But when we're consuming our corporate content, there's these different drivers and consumption methods. It's consuming email on a company-owned device, maybe doing that on a personal device. I may have remote employees, I may have IoT devices, I may have SaaS apps that connect to those. But that functional perimeter of my four walls, my firewall, my VPN, that's gone away for the most part, and especially in things like COVID-19 and a strong work from home initiative. But that shifted how we have to secure our data and our users and our devices. And functionally, there are technologies and concepts such as Zero Trust that help us get there. When we look at some core assumptions versus what is really the reality, you could have maybe assumed this in the past, and maybe today you assume this, but when you think about it, we start with things like who consumes your data. Well, in most cases, those are your users. The reality really is it's not just your employees. Those could be contractors, those could be partners like a Netrix, those could be your customers. So now that's even going outside to another, hopefully trusted provider, but they are consumers of the service. I may need to enforce security because they're accessing that content. The other assumption is that corporate managed devices are secure, and they can be. But the reality today with COVID is that a lot of folks have had to very quickly adjust to a BYO strategy. I think over the last couple of years, we've seen a significant shift on the mobile trend from BYO. Right now, due to high demand and need, we've even seen a shift in having to acquire or leverage personal PCs or personal laptops for consumption of that content as well. So how do we make sure our data is secure as we get into that model? The other assumption is that all of our apps are on-prem, and really we can't ignore the reality of the cloud and all the SaaS app providers that are out there today and having to control access to them. Primarily this is done through things like your identity provider, but again, you can't just control that within our walls. We can't force people to always VPN in. We can't force them to always come in through Citrix or Horizon because no one really planned for this heavy work from home strategy needing to be accelerated so quick, like Vlad mentioned. The other assumption is, again, your corporate network and firewall, you have an expanding perimeter, kind of like that last diagram I showed of all these like arms and spiders, spider webs over the place. And then again, moving from, kind of this concept of packet tracking and logs to having signal from everywhere. And a lot of folks underutilize that signal from the endpoint, from the user, from the identity provider, from the SaaS app. This is extremely valuable, especially for determining if there's threats that are coming in, and helping to be a little bit more proactive. So how we've all changed over the course of this time, the average user consumes about 5.2 mobile business apps a day. In this case, for me, that is Outlook, that is PowerPoint and Excel, that is, to do on my Android device or my iPad. But I am in probably roughly 4 or 5 or 6 applications on a daily basis. The number of organizations that have shifted to the cloud has gone up as well. I think the number for the Fortune 500 is in the higher 98 or 99% as well. But 94% of organizations use the cloud, whether they know it or not. They may be consuming a SaaS app service. That makes them consuming a resource in the cloud. The number of internet connected devices is 7 billion. That's only growing from here, as I think we all see. And about 60% of organizations have a formal BYO plan in place. That number, though, is an interesting stat because they have mostly a formal BYO policy defined for mobile, but no one really saw what happened with the pandemic, and having to potentially adopt that for a PC or a Mac-based device as well. So even that has shifted quite a bit. So in order to secure this ever-growing set of resources, really a modern approach is needed today. And the goal, the primary takeaway today is we can look at securing that access at the resource itself versus the perimeter. And that's really fundamentally, when we talk zero trust, that's really what the foundation of zero trust is. We look at the history of zero trust, as Vlad said, it is really, it's kind of a buzzword that's going out there. Different vendors have different, definitions. I'm trying to, for today, we'll just try to genericize that a little bit. We look at kind of the Jericho Forum introducing the concept of zero trust in 2004. Operation Aurora attack happened in 2009, and then Forrester finally recognized the term zero trust in 2010, with BeyondCorp being kind of the first real published consumer, published provider of a zero trust type model. Now you've got everyone looking to get on board, from a network firewall, IDP provider to zero trust, and that's really what's taken off over probably the last 2.5 to 3 years or so. The most important part is that it's hard to quantify zero trust to items 1 through 10. It is really truly a mindset. And we'll go through what some of these mindset changes are, and then some vendors will technically achieve those with their capabilities. One of the biggest benefits, though, is that change in mindset. So the one important mindset change is changing your approach of security that treats every access attempt, if it's originating from an untrusted network. When you look at literally the term of zero trust, it is not trusting anything. And that's a shift from in the past where I said, hey, everything on my LAN is trusted. Well, what happens if someone breaches my edge network and is now quote unquote inside? This is a common misconception I run across with customers today, where they leverage IP whitelisting, or they leverage other insider type rules to say, no, you're trusted, but your inside is only as secure as your perimeter is. And there is complete capability of people getting in, which is why it's important, where Vlad will talk about how to even protect your edge further with some of these core concepts as well. But again, we really need to look at other factors besides just saying a wide swath of trust is issued. The other thing is always assume a pervasive risk, and also understand, how do you behave if this risk occurs? So in the past, it was, allow but log. Now this may be allow but limit, or it may be block until we can trust. These different approaches can allow us a little bit more granularity based on different types of controls offered and the different type of telemetry that is available. One of the big mindset shifts as well as we go into a couple of these is assume everything is open on the internet. And this just doesn't mean, your website is the only open thing, or a website you publish from your internal internet, or your, Azure, AWS, or GCP platform is open. Assume your PC sitting at your desk is open on the internet. Always assume that there's going to be potentially some way to get in some form to your device. It can be scary, that can be overwhelming, but if you start with this mindset, you start to think a little bit differently on how you secure the different resources and the steps to get to that point. The other thing to focus in on is changing your mindset to not trusting a single source. Single sources can be manipulated, so making sure you have different data points in order to identify that trust state of that user, of that device, of where they're coming in from, et cetera, and not just leveraging one thing. So as many factors as you can is ideal. The other is breach containment. We look at what happened in Japan. We look at Chernobyl. If an event does occur, how do we contain this? And Vlad will talk about some concepts in a little bit here on how we can leverage modern capabilities to do this. But the goal is you want to have a plan. You want to make sure that something, you want to change your mindset to know that when something occurs, not if, that you will have a breach containment plan so it doesn't spread wider than it is today. And I mean, unfortunately, this is the reality today. There aren't enough humans, regardless of what we're going through with COVID-19 today. The security and information security industry has just been inundated with too many requests and too few resources. And, things are ramping, I think, slowly here and getting more and more folks introduced in the market. But the biggest issue is there's a gap in heavy and strong skill sets today. It's really difficult to find folks that are mature in some of these areas and concepts to go hit the ground running. So that may mean that you have to sacrifice your policy or your strategy to maybe start a little bit slower and have someone come in and build things. The reality is we have to help reduce some of that uplift in the process to get to that point. This is probably my favorite, and I use this every day, is it kind of takes those core concepts and bring to a single one, which is assume breach. You should always assume there's an attacker on the inside. You should always assume that someone is on your home network, your work network, your services. If you do that functionally, you're always looking for something. You're always, not taking that alert and closing it that may be an anomaly. This is a really significant change in how you approach security in your organization, but very critical. And we see this a lot with nation state attackers, the big APTs that are, getting in these environments and sometimes not exfilling content for, days, weeks, or months in many cases. But you should always assume that there is, a breach on your network or a breach on your devices, so you operate with the most trust where possible. In a zero trust model, the high level, again, it's taking all those previous pieces I mentioned. So making sure every access is strongly authenticated within policy constraints. It's making sure the user identity is trusted. It's employing micro-segmentation, using least privilege access principles. This is really critical. Don't just assume that all these things are trusted, or if maybe one is not trusted, that they just have full access. Limit their access. And then use rich intelligence and analytics. A lot of cases when we talk zero trust, it comes down to things like the device is a part of the factor, as well as identity, as well as where they're actually coming in from. These things should all be a part of that overall risk profile. So last couple of things to talk about here is just, do you grok? Do you understand and have a knowledge of what zero trust and how it can be used in your organization? The first step to adopting a zero trust strategy is establish a V team. Zero trust is not a strategy that can be implemented by one person or one silo within the organization. You need identity, you need endpoint, you need your edge infrastructure team, and you need those technical folks involved to make that decision and make it reality. You also need to develop a point that you can get to. What are your goals and how do you get to that point, and what do you achieve to measure success, as well as be real about where you are today. You may not be the most mature organization. You may not even be close to this, but having that humility to know where you're at today and the path to get there is super important, as well as entertaining your C-level and making sure they really understand this concept and why it's important versus maybe how things have been done in the past. This is really critical to get executive buy-in. If I was to, in the last two slides here, is really boil down zero trust. If you were to take one thing away, it's zero trust is an approach to security that treats every access attempt as if it's originating from an untrusted network. As I said throughout kind of this foundation of zero trust, trust no one, trust nothing. That's really that foundation of zero trust. And again, the principles are around verifying explicitly, least privilege access, and assume breach. This is just a very quick model of zero trust and what you can use to adopt it. This is a model that we leverage with Microsoft, for instance, but this core policy set can apply to anyone and any technology. It's always looking at different factors such as user risk and device risk, and even integrated threat intelligence or your own. And then essentially a giant if this then that policy. If completely good, get access as needed. If not good, either drop into a segmented network while you remediate the issue, or block depending on the severity of that issue. But it really comes mostly from signal being the source, the decision being made, and then the enforcement handling in each one of those realms, whether it's trust fully, partially trust, or don't trust at all. And aligning that back to some technology, because we do this quite a bit in that Microsoft realm. This looks very, very busy, probably a bit of an eye chart, but these are some of the different methods of signal you can employ, the decision tools and technology, and then the enforcement options you have. And then Vlad, again, will talk a little bit about how we can achieve this too from, say, a network layer. So with that, I hope you got a good understanding, a base understanding of kind of the concept of zero trust, potentially some areas to look at and think about. And then I'll turn it over to Vlad to talk a bit about the new network edge and how we can achieve this with some of our the new technologies in market today.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. Guys, I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. I wanted to bring everyone back to the network edge. Like Rich mentioned, on a couple of occasions, the network edge has significantly changed, or the importance of the network edge as it is today has been significantly diminished, because, like Rich pointed out, in the early days of networking, it was everyone was kind of building that castle approach to security, where everyone was building thick and tall walls and was building the layered security components inside those walls, right? They were, everyone was relying on firewalls, sandboxing technologies, malware protection, network-based malware detection, protection technologies, antivirus, right? But all these components were very much limited to a specific physical location, or basically they were limited to the scope of these were limited to your physical offices. As we found out in the last couple of weeks, in a split second, things can change really quickly, and a lot of our customers were forced to move, to nearly 100% work from home. So they quickly had to rethink what this new network edge should look like. And what we saw is that we were asked a lot of questions. We talked with our customers, with many different customers, about the different challenges that they had, and we basically started helping them formulate what this new network edge should look like. I like this. I hope you guys like this slide with the spider web that Rich showed, but kind of along the same thoughts. One of my friends coined the saying basically that the edge is now everywhere, right? The network edge is not the couple of devices that sit in your network. Your network edge overnight, because of the pandemic and because of the work from home movement, all of a sudden expanded to all your employees' houses. And in that network edge, in that little network, which was probably protected by a home firewall without the necessary controls in place, all of a sudden, your employees conducting business, accessing your data, whether in the on-premise or in the cloud, right? So that little home network now became extension of your corporate network, and moreover, that the significant other of your employees is probably also working from that same office, from that same home office network, and accessing another corporate network. So the the point is that the network, the kind of the traditional approach to the network edge and the network insecurity layers in the network edge have been blurred, and the network edge approach needs to be rethought and re-architected very, very quickly here. Throughout the last 45 to 60 days, if I have to summarize some of the conversations that I've had with our customers, I can group them in a couple of in like three different groups, right? The first group of questions that kind of came early on in like late March, early April is, hey, how do I keep my business running? You know, customers kind of came to us and were asking us, well, how do I enable this work from home? What does it really mean for me? So, you know, we spent a lot of time with our customers to enable in very short order the work from home, the initial work from home push, right? In some cases, we actually had customers who came to us on a Friday afternoon and said, hey, by Monday, we need you guys we need your guys' help. We need to be working from home. And we need your guys' expertise to help us get there, right? Other customers of ours had a little bit more leeway, so they did a little bit more planning, and they had the opportunity to not only figure out how to connect the users to the data, but they came to us with questions of not only how do I connect my users, but also how do I scale my infrastructure? How do I make sure that I do not compromise security when I connect this many people who have never been connected to, who have never worked from home remotely previously, right? And the third group of questions which are coming our way, and they actually are still coming our way, is how do I make sure that this solution is adapted for the new normal, right? So, once our customers kind of went through the initial, Band-Aids and duct tape type of solutions to enable people to work remotely, now, they're realizing that this new normal is here to stay, and they actually will need to work they need to enable their employees to work remotely for an extensive period of time. It's not just a week or a month type of situation. Our customers have come to us and started asking us to help them architect this zero trust or this new network perimeter to enable the 100% work from home type of environment. So if I have to summarize the type of kind of the specifics of the questions that we have been asked from a network perimeter perspective is, the one big challenge that we saw is our customers' VPN solutions were designed for accessing, or they were designed a while back, right? They've been in place for a while, and they were designed for accessing the corporate data, which used to sit in the data center, and accessing of that data by a handful of people, right? In my experience, a lot of our customers had VPN solutions which were used by the IT organization or by a handful of departments within the business. And kind of quickly overnight, our customers had to figure out how to enable access not only for on-premise data, but also for cloud data, and how to do it in a way where that kind of connectivity is available for all the employees, not just 5% or 10% for the workforce, right? Some of the actual problems that we hit is that our customers hit and came asking for help is that, hey, my VPN concentrator is it's hardware capped to support only half of my users or less, right? Or I have a VPN concentrator, but I'd never licensed it, or there was a license problem, capacity problem from a physical infrastructure perspective. The other issues are that kind of the other questions that we saw from an infrastructure perspective is a lot of our customers' networks are, meaning remote access for customers was set up out of the data center, and that data center had limited amount of bandwidth. And customers were worried that if they get a couple of thousand users to connect remotely, that bandwidth is not going to be enough. Obviously, this is a type of problem that you can't really solve overnight, and it is really hard to dynamically scale and kind of plan dynamically your infrastructure when everything is sitting on premise, right? Another interesting problem that we saw is that some of our customers who have adopted numerous of SaaS applications for the business had implemented security controls for those SaaS applications, which allowed access to those cloud applications only from a public IP address of the office, right, or of the data center, which basically means that the users, when the users are sitting at their house, the direct to cloud SaaS access or SaaS application access wasn't really possible. So we had to do some kind of creative network configurations to go around those kind of limitations. And the third type of problems that we saw were really security risk related problems, which because of those capacity issues, our customers had to make certain concessions. They basically had to, the IT organizations or the security organizations within the enterprises have had to accept that they need to do split tunnel, right? We all know that enabling split tunneling is a big no-no for security organization, for the security governance compliance organizations or for auditors. But some of our customers had to do that kind of accept that kind of a risk simply because they had capacity limitations and they had no other way around it. So this being said, these kind of challenges that we see, and by the way, the overall movement to cloud and to remote worker type of solutions has, in our opinion, actually in a lot of opinions out there, has rendered the current network perimeter as legacy. The having that fortress doesn't make much sense anymore if the assets that you're protecting don't sit inside the castle anymore, right? That's why Gartner actually started tracking last year. Started tracking a new approach to. They started tracking a new market, by the way, which they call Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE, which is the new approach to how organizations should be thinking about their perimeter, right? Then with this approach, all these traditional features and capabilities, which were part of the physical network edge, part of physical appliances sitting inside your office, and they were part of your network perimeter, are now being virtualized, and they're basically becoming a network services layer and a security services layer shim between your users and the cloud, right? And the beauty of this approach is that you are able to enforce your security and connectivity policies for your users, regardless of whether the users sit in your branch office, if they sit in your corporate office, or if they're a mobile worker, right? They get the same type of policies, the same type of controls applied for when they reach out to your SaaS applications, public cloud or internet. And those type of services, which are we see a kind of significant push to move to the cloud, are VPN type of services, right? Whether it's a site-to-site VPN or remote access, client-based, client-less type of VPN, or SD-WAN for connecting remote sites. having this VPN type of services in this secure access service set or in this cloud-based new cloud-based perimeter is critical because it provides the unlimited scalability. It provides the unlimited kind of instant access to additional bandwidth. It's some instant access to additional capacity, which a lot of our customers saw as a big problem as they were trying to react to the pandemic, right? In the same time, the services like firewalls and services that were traditionally provided by firewalls, such as zero trust for the network access or identifying the user and providing certain type certain type of access or certain application access for the user which were kind of traditionally handled by the perimeter firewalls are now able and available to be provided by this new cloud layer or the new perimeter. What this allows you to do is to ensure that you can have the same network-based zero trust approach and the same you can make your users subject to the same type of IPS, IDS, sandboxing, malware protection, command and control type of protection capabilities from a network perspective, regardless whether your users are sitting inside your, the physical four walls of your office, or if they're in Starbucks, or if they're in a hotel on another continent, right? So this being said, how the way we can help you guys here at Netrix is, we are a Microsoft Gold partner, and we're specialized, among other things with Microsoft, we specialize in security, as well as we are a Palo Alto partner, which is the leading provider for SASE, or this this new network perimeter, which a lot of our customers are already in process of adopting or planning to adopt. So my recommendation is for you guys is if you have gone, meaning if actually I'm assuming everyone on this call has put a lot of efforts to migrate to enable their users to work remotely, throughout, some of you or a lot of you may have kind of made some compromises and accepted certain level of security risk. You've cut corners here and there to enable things quickly. My recommendation is to take, now is the time to take a moment, take a step back and reassess your security posture, right? One way we can help you is we have a tailored, we have a remote access, remote worker tailored security risk assessment where we can help you identify how things have changed for you, specifically for your business from a policy procedure perspective, from a technology perspective, vulnerability, threat exposure perspective. We can help you quantify what that risk is and create a roadmap of how to mitigate it in future. And on another hand, if you're not so worried about policies, procedures, if you're not subject to any regulatory compliance requirements, and you're more worried about the technical aspects of things, we have partnered with Microsoft to develop deliver a secure remote worker workshop for our customers, through which we go through the zero trust concepts and this new network perimeter concepts, and help you kind of plan the technical aspects of how you need to readjust your approach for the new normal that, in my mind, it's not coming. The new normal is already here. With this, we will conclude the presentation for today. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them in the Q&A session, the Q&A section of the live presentation. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.